Welcome once again to, our program is called From Inside. And it's not only from inside the Center for Optimum Living, but pointing to what's coming from inside of all of us. And tonight, what the old ones knew. What the old ones knew is the topic, if you will. I'll be speaking with life coach Kevin Simonson, who used this phrase a few weeks ago. We were having a discussion, and I thought that's really what might be a good topic, if you will, coupled up with the fact that he's found some of his great-great-grandmother's diaries, one passage of which he shared with me, I think is just absolutely perfect for what we're all going through. And those of you who are familiar with us know that what we do here is we have a dialogue. We don't have any predetermined agenda other than having the title and having Kevin share with us what the passage that we know he's going to share, and then we will have a dialogue. A dialogue is more than just a conversation. It's a real connecting between two people on a deeper, truer level, with mutual respect, mutual care. This is not a debate, which is the total opposite, logical sparring with each other. This is from our hearts, our own life experiences about what we're all going through and what people have gone through, what some of the old ones knew. So, Kevin, start wherever you'd like, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, good evening. I want to thank you for the opportunity, because years ago, I knew of these diaries, and I had a discussion with my great uncle who remembered some of these old people, such the point that, the way he described them, he was giving me a vision of his great grandfather, which is my great great grandfather. And I could see a portal back through time. And I wondered at that time, years ago, did any of them consider who was coming after them? Did any one of them consider themselves the antecedents of who was to come? Mm-hmm. I talked enough about him and his wife, Laura Ann Noble, such that when he sold the camp up on Lake Champlain, where the family came from, he bestowed me these diaries. And I began reading her writing. But it was in a time when I was not quite ready to really apprehend exactly what she was talking about. But with the oncoming of this pandemic and the fact that we're all kind of hitting a new threshold, and the coincidence of you mentioning this to me, Laura Ann Noble, my great-great-grandmother, came back to life. And I realized that I had a bounty of these diaries, her words. I can quickly show you who she was. She was born in 1932. Not that, excuse me. She was born in 1832. And she was the second wife of my great-great-grandfather, and they lived up in northern New York State. It was difficult living up there. They were into lumber and iron and whatever they could do, try to be good community members. And she was, all of a sudden, about 165 years ago to this day, she woke up one morning and her entire life had changed. I'm going to just give you a quick picture of who she was. This is great-great-grandma in her much latter years. This is a daguerreotype, I believe. And I'm not gonna belabor this any further. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of a series of diaries that begins May 24th, 1864. And if you can read a little bit of her writing, it's like 7 o'clock that morning, the light of my life went out. So I transcribed it. So I'm just going to read this to you here. May 24th, at 7 o'clock that morning, the light of my life went out. In the darkness of sorrow, I know not how to commence again. nor how to assume the responsibilities in which I seem to be enveloped in just now. God only knows the dreadful depths into which I am fallen. Last night at 9 o'clock, his dear feet were walking by my bedside, and soon his precious head rested on his pillow near me for the last time. He fell into apparently an easy slumber immediately, but in 1.5 hours I was suddenly woke, and turning to him, found his heart beating immoderately, his pulse very feeble. I attempted to arouse family when his undying affection for me, even with his dying breath, was shown. He exclaimed, "Oh, don't. Oh, don't, you will hurt yourself." He was then in a dreadful chill. The doctor's shumway soon came. Every effort by the family and all was made to relieve him in his mortal sufferings. But about 2 o'clock, an abscess broke in the lungs, and immediately he grew insensible. They labored on, but nothing restored that great intellect and the heart of affection. God had dealt a blow, and it must fall. Shorter and shorter his breathing was, until he rested from earth's care and toils at 7 o'clock. God keep me and uphold me.
Mm. Wow.
And she carries on from there.
Yep.
She was left with 2 children, an expansive business, and the point that I've seen now is that little by little, she vacillates back and forth over the months and over the years between coming back to her sorrow, her grief, her desolation, but also finding solace in the people, in the community, and especially nature. So rather than allowing the outside world to define her, she worked from within. She worked from within herself.
With, as you said, community, with others, with others.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going through our own hard times, as I've said every week, some of us mildly and some majorly, some who are truly right up there in the front lines day after day after day, exhausted, working in situations that I've heard the word chaos used more than once. To others who are fairly just sort of moving along and making whatever adjustments that they need to make. But I think the beauty of this statement, and I know a little more beyond it from what Kevin has read so far, the beauty is that she goes so purely, clearly into the present experience of what she was experiencing, the moment by moment difficulty in his breathing.
Yeah.
And yeah, we live in a life that is in balance between the most wonderful things in life and the other side, those heart-wrenching things. And yet we continue and we move on. And that's what we're here to do, to connect with one another so we all are able to move on, to move through, to move forward, Mm-hmm. The opposite of old is not new. I mean, the opposite of old is not young. The opposite of old is new. We're all moving toward oldness or getting older. Well, we're moving toward newness of, okay, new things now. Things based on my wisdom, things I've learned in my life, and things I've learned from those who came before me. Mm-hmm. I think about my grandfather coming here, the typical immigrant story, $5 in his pocket, the rest of his family still in Sicily, to eventually get them over to begin a life. And to your point earlier, was it, what was it, did he have any sense of what would come of his children and grandchildren?
Yeah.
And in your case, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
What becomes of us? And what is it we bring and draw from our ancestors that comes through us, if you will?
I mean, what I've drawn from these particular ancestors, because we know we go, you go back and you've got like 4, 8, 64. I mean, it really gets kind of diluted, but these days, I'll sort of take my inspiration wherever I can get it. And she has really, she's kind of been with me for a long time. But what I get, particularly in this time, is, I use the word antecedent before. We're kind of the old ones for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what are we going to be in 6 months? What are we going to be in a year?
Mm-hmm.
And I take from them how they do it, how they did it. Granted, they had a lot less information,
Mm-hmm.
but they had a lot more, at least she had a lot more sense of trying to come to ground so she could stand on a solid footing where she could see a farther horizon. And she goes back and forth and back and forth.
And like you say, how did they do it? How can we learn from them? What is the it? Mm-hmm. How did they go through life with all the rough times and the good times? How did they do it? Mm-hmm. How did they find their balance between the most wonderful and the most terrible? You know, I often, somewhat jokingly, but very seriously say that, you know, it's like we're walking a line, mm-hmm. you know, like the yin-yang symbol, like a baseball, that squiggle. We're walking on that path. And in the beginning, it can feel like a tightrope. Mm-hmm. And as you continue to stay and balance yourself, eventually you're on like a sidewalk. Mm-hmm. If not even a highway. I guess if you're the Dalai Lama or Jesus or someone, then it's like a super highway.
Yes.
But the rest of us mortals, we work our balance.
And if I'm on the path of the yin yang, because you started this, if I turn to the left, right. It is all black. It is all black. And on the 27th, 3 days after, she wrote 3 lines. I was not able to go to the grave and see him laid low in his earth bed, alone now. This one gets me. I mean, I'm so alone now.
You're not the only one.
I am alone with many dear, kind friends around me, and my Savior so near. But this human love was so sustaining. Is it as the going down of the sun? And she's all the way to the left.
Right.
She's all the way to the left where it's all black. But you know, it would be delusional. It would be delusional to turn all the way to the right where everything is bright and fine and let me go out and commingle with everybody in the world.
Right. It's often said, like, if you turn all the way to the right and you put your back to any negative, it's, you know, now you're like a bliss ninny. Oh, everything is wonderful and great and fantastic. You turn the other way, you're, you know, the downer of the party. I mean, you're depressed, you're down, you're pessimistic. The other way, you're overly optimistic. To walk between them is, this has been a hard time and this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And what am I learning from this situation that will be able to help me the next time the waves come in, next time things go?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, learning to be aware, learning to, as she goes on down through the months and a couple of years, you know, I noticed she alluded to the sun, the going down of the sun, but she constantly returned to nature because nature does not have to be the backdrop of our sorrows. You know, nature is out there. Nature is out there for us to do with as we wish. And she used it as a source of,
right now.
She used it as a source of inspiration.
I mean, how often has there been a beautiful day? Yeah. And you think about how some people might not even notice what they don't even notice.
Yes. When I was in grad school, I realized, and this is the importance of getting off the path. I realized it had been 5 days since I had looked up at the sky. And I have never forgotten that. I've never forgot that. I haven't looked at the sky in 5 days.
And I remember one time in New York, realizing for me to see the sky, I have to keep looking straight up. There's only a few places where I could go and really get more of a panoramic view. But all of that affects us on every level, even physically. The contraction of a little tiny muscle in the eye, which is called, I believe it's a ciliary muscle, which contracting, you're able to have more of a narrow focus. It's also the thing that happens when we're under stress. We go into a narrow focus. And living out of the present, out of touch with nature, out of communion, out of community with other people, we have a stress reaction to that, sometimes well below our consciousness, was a stress reaction. And in that stress reaction, there's a narrowing of focus, and we see the details. We get caught up in the details and lose the bigger picture.
Yes.
And it is so easy to do, and especially in this culture, with being inundated with all kinds of stuff at every moment. So we try to do this, that, and the other thing.
Which generally is trying to convey, get back to something get back to the known. I mean, if we are talking about the old ones, there is the old saying, it's like, how I miss my chains, Yeah. I mean, in here they write about, because there were many, many deaths, they write about, he laid his Christian armor aside and was gathered up in the arms of his Savior. But the armor, the armor can be constricting. It can also be liberating to let you, headlong, bash into a situation. But the word bash is very fortuitous. I mean, I'm not here tonight. I don't think we're here tonight to, this is not Jane Austen. This woman was not like writing novels and hiding them in the walls because she wanted people to find them later. I don't know what she wanted, but she wrote, and she clearly, to me, she wrote what she thought. Now, there's from the 1600s, there's Basho, and Basho's injunction is, do not seek to do what the old ones did. Seek what they sought.
Yes. Seek what they sought.
Seek what they sought. Because this is our time.
This is our time to be seeking what we are seeking, but hopefully it's what they sought.
Mm-hmm. The same thing
to
connected
be
across the generations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason I called the practice when I started the Center for Optimum Living is because having a good life, having a balanced life, having a healthy life isn't something that just comes to you. Maybe some people it does. I've never really met anyone that it just landed in that. But it's what you do with the raw material that comes to you. It's from that inner center point that you say, okay, this is where my path begins. It doesn't begin outside of me. It begins inside here.
Yes.
What lifts my spirits? What makes me feel more whole, more healthy, less stressed, more in connection with my fellow human beings? What makes me feel more, and now words fail here, but the big one is love.
Yes. What
enables me to feel more love, which means connection. It also means courage. It means patience, or I should say it has within love, there's courage and patience and truth and righteousness and wisdom and passion and compassion and all the nice words that makes us feel like, wow, this is a moment of being wonderfully alive. And it would be idealistic to assume that you'll live that way 24/7. Yes. Because we live in a culture and a society that says, when I was a kid, everyone would say, chop, chop, get going. Come on, get going, get going. Where I grew up, I hear that from the younger people, and the older ones, they would always say, Ashbet. Take it easy. Where do you think you'll go?
Yes.
100 years from now, nobody's going to know the difference. And take care. Take it easy. My grandfather's sitting in his garden, just sitting there. I kind of get to do that once in a while, and I love it. I love it, just to sit there and to be within nature. And to I have to share the story. My 3-year-old granddaughter is here with us. And on both sides of our home, there's windows where there's a robins nesting. And we've been watching them. She's given them names. And the one that's right outside the door to the office, there's a nest. And we've been going there, and we always make like some bird sounds to get near. And, the bird has gotten used to us. So the robin is kind of used to us. It even will stay on the bench. We're only about 10, 15 feet from it. So we make these little bird sounds. And Ella began to match the bird sound like exactly. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me and said, Grandpa, that's no good what you're doing. I said, okay, you do it. And she was like, and she and the bird, it was like tweeting back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then a little later in the afternoon, I said, Ella, your friend Mia's here. And she knew, of course, it's what she named the robin. She comes running over, And almost like you're watching a Native American. She starts dancing with her arms under, she says, I'm doing my wings and they're chirping, and this bird is dancing with Ella. And I'm saying, now what is this? Well, this is the kind of thing that is so natural, but we don't even pay attention to because we're usually too busy.
That's right.
We're going too fast. We live in a culture that says, speed it up, move it around. Now, can we live, dancing with birds on the lawn? No, we can't you can't do that. We have to find between the practicalities of our everyday lives and to go into it from the inside, from that awareness of life is not just from the time I was born to when I died. Life is going back into ancestry and what has come down to me, both in the forms of, say, a diary or expressions or things said, and all those unconscious things that we're not even aware of that are in our genes that just kind of come through us to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Words fail. You said words fail. I have friends in Denville, and I was invited over a couple of days ago just to have a fire at night. It's around Cook's Pond. And we noticed that there are more fires around the lake than they'd ever seen before. But I was sitting back, and we often talk about following the questions, the whole time I've known you, I've never gotten an answer. It's always, it's always posing the questions, but it's not necessarily the question, well, do I want to follow that path, or, does that feel right to me? I was sitting back, and the light slowly got darker, and I saw my friends' faces lit up by the flickering flames. And I just loved that. Why do I love seeing my friends' faces in the flickering flames? And how do I get more of that in my life now?
My daughter Laura was in a place some years ago called In the Next Room.
Yeah.
And there was a scene. This was right when electricity was starting to come in. And her husband was all excited about putting light bulbs in the house. They wouldn't have to light the candles anymore. And I think it was through song that she sings a song about the missing of the candlelight and the flicker and how it makes you look so different. And how nice it is that as the darkness comes in, we come in. So we're talking about a time period where, which was following what Laura Ann Noble lived through.
Yes. And if we talk about
to come with lights, with jets, with internet,
Yes. And all of that served, the coming of the electric light served to scatter people. Mm-hmm. At night, they would gather around the fire. At night, they would gather around the hearth. But with the coming of the electric light, you could be in another room.
Exactly. And then you've got the circle, as you said before, the coming together in the circle around
coming together both spatially and temporally, coming together over the days, over the seasons.
When my wife and I first moved out here, there was an editorial in one of the papers where it was called the end of the dinner time bonding hour. And I said to my wife, well, you should read this. This is terrible. Saying people are out here, and I said, we have to really work to make sure we have that dinner time bonding hour. That's so important. And a couple of years later, well, where's Laura? She has this thing at school. Where's Marielle? She has to go to the thing. And then next thing you know, I thought, when I was in grad school, they talked about how there was this tendency to go from the expanded family, where your whole community is your family, to the nuclear family, where everyone was sort of together in their own little tight circle in their yard, whatever, to what was being predicted was what was going to be called the exploding family, with everyone going all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so many times when I'm meeting new clients and they'll tell me about themselves and they say, my son lives in Chicago, my daughter's in California, my mother's in Florida and this and that, it's become the natural way for everything to pull out. And you have the churches and other community groups trying to hold people together. Mm-hmm. But it's much less natural than in the days when you find a plot of land and you put in and you see the people next to you and You start seeing who you resonate with, and they become your friends and your family and sons. And my grandfather coming over here with his family, and from a culture where you simply look up someone from your town and they say, of course, you can stay with us until you get settled.
Yes.
Community.
You went a calling.
Yeah, you want to call?
Oh, we're going to call today. And it was the greatest thing, to receive a calling card. It had no information on it. It didn't have a phone number. It had just your name. Oh, he stopped by. He went on a call. So we've seen this. I mean, we've been given this opportunity to see what they sought.
Yeah. In this situation, right here, right now, in the middle of this pandemic.
Yes.
Which we never anticipated a year ago we'd be living through.
No.
As our ancestors sometimes, went through things as intensive and perhaps, and certainly and much more at times in their lives. And yet they have learned something that we can learn from.
Well, they are why we are here.
They are why we are here. What
better gift to give to the past than to, rearrange our lives even slightly to make a better future.
And to make a better future coming out of this present.
Yes. John Panola.
Yes.
John Panola, the venerable life coach of the Center for Optimum Living, once asked me, so Kevin, 10 years from now, you think you're going to look back on this moment and you think you're going to be on track? And I have not forgotten that. Yeah. I can't remember it 24 hours a day, but it's those slivers of time during the day. It's like, okay, I'm going to get myself back on track. Okay. No, it's there.
The center is there.
Yes.
There is that place inside your true self, deep self, true spirit, whatever you want to call it. There is a place within us from which the best of us can come forth. Our courage, our sense of order and balance. This is a wonderful time in so many people's lives because they have an opened up space of unscheduled time that they can tend to. And how about emptying what you don't need? How about rearranging things that would be create a better order to your life?
Yeah.
Because that's what they sought back then. They sought an order that can have a balance and a life energy to it. You use the word things from the periphery that inspire you. To be inspired is to have our inner spirit lifted up. And again, what is that spirit? It's all the things we all seek.
Yeah.
Happiness, joy, connection. So what is it that lifts our spirits? And also, one of the things that lifts our spirits is lifting someone else's spirits because we are interconnected.
Yes.
To help one another, do unto others. It's so simple, but we get so busy, we forget that. I'm sure your ancestors, including Laura Ann Noble, it's a beautiful name, by the way.
I like it.
Had that sense. I mean, they didn't live as long of lives as we do today, and they had hard, rough lives. And perhaps that kept them in a sense of, let's not lose touch with all that's good. Let us practice gratitude. My God.
Yeah.
How do you practice gratitude? I whenever I think of this, I often go to Viktor Frankl, who practiced gratitude in the death camps. It made me think, wow, if people could do it in those situations, I could do it out here.
Yes.
Now, there was one second passage right after that, I think, when she received information from her about her brother. Yeah.
We went from May. This was May, and then the funeral in July, July 5th. A bright and cheering day, and yet I feel so desolate. My burden seems greater than I can bear. God only knows the depths of sorrow I feel, but he will sustain me. A letter from my good brother B came. He is better. And she kept reaching out. What I take from her is the constant abiding presence in her life was herself.
Yes.
It was not, the church was a very powerful force, the community was a very powerful force. You didn't want people, gossiping against you, but she kept coming back to herself, and she kept hunting for good news.
Yeah. And that, gave me the image as you read that of her standing there with one arm, on the grief of what she was experiencing, and other on her faith, her God, her optimism, her joy. And we live in that center place. And when we fight it, we suffer. We add suffering to our suffering.
Yes.
When we are aware of it and accept it. And that's my story. These are rough things, bad things that have happened in my life. These are good things, wonderful things that happen in my life. And that's part of my story from which I have learned from, including what I learned from just the presence of sitting with my own grandfather in his garden. When, if we were to write out every word we ever said to each other, it might be 3 pages in the course of our whole relationship together.
Yeah. Except
one time when I was maybe 11, I asked him if when he died, I could have his pocket knife. And I remember he laughed. And I thought, why is he laughing? I thought that's a good question. I know he's old. He's going to die. Let me have your pocket knife. But anyway, the kind of things that you remember from being in the presence of people who are more present and hearing, through the diary. And, for me, she came through. You're reading and seeing that. It's like, maybe there really is something to the fact that when you love someone, they're always with you. And they kind of live through you. You become the lead and they come up behind you and they're there to kind of help move you forward into your life. So coincidence that you've found all these diaries? No, this is the angels saying, eat.
Yes.
Please take this and run with it. This is beautiful stuff.
Thrive.
We will in the future continue, assuming you're okay with that. I would love to continue in the future dialogues based on different parts of your great-great-grandmother's diary.
Yeah.
One with the changing of seasons that just brought tears to my eyes. Such beautiful, in the moment experiences that what we're all hoping to get toward. And we had the hard work done for us generations ago to get us to where we are now.
Yes.
And now it's our turn to do the work and to make the adjustments and to continue on, not only for for those with whom we are become genetic connections through our blood, but through our experiences with other people. People, as they say, for a season and for a lifetime, whatever. But to be with other people in a way that is the way you would like people to be with you. Yeah. Easier said than done. But it starts with slowing down enough to be able to have moments of dialogue, whether it's a circle of 2 or a circle of 15. And as I said at the beginning, that for years we've had what we call a dialogue group at the center. Throughout human history, people have gathered in circles, often around a fire. And for us, we have one candle. That
one behind you, yes.
That's our symbolic fire, in which people could sit and just take a breath and be with each other and tell their stories of their day and their stories of what has happened in their own life, without judgment, without preaching, without telling anyone this is the way it should be and supposed to be. But what is your story? Putting us more in touch with the one who is telling the story and living the story and co-writing the story. It's learning to live under our own authority. And the word authority is authorship. Is the author, that we can be writing our own story. Yes. Co-writing, I must say, because life is a dialogue. All right, here's what life has brought. This will be my response. I think it's a Sufi book. I think it's from that tradition. It's called the Book of Life, and you'd be given to a baby. And on one page, it would say, essentially, I'm going to bring it up to modern language. You're going to be born, you're going to have mom and dad, they'll feed you, take care of you. Then then you'll go to school and these things will happen. And the other side of the page is blank. And the indication is that because this is what life is going to bring, and this part of your story is going to be your response to what life brings. And then it'll be the next event or next phase. And now how are you going to respond to that? Mm-hmm. Life is about responding. Our ancestors were incredible people because the fact that we're here.
Yes.
And we are here because of them and what they went through and their learning to use their courage and their strength, mm-hmm. and open to divine inspiration, because how did they ever do some of the things they've done without really knowing? They didn't have manuals or cell phones, and yet they... So we shall continue with this because I just
go on.
But I just love the fact that we now have access to these journals, if you will, these gems of wisdom from a beautifully articulate and deeply spiritually connected, present woman. And so,
words were her comfort.
Yes. And now they've comforted us.
Yes.
Even though they kind of awakened us to these scary things that happen in life. But yes, that's where courage comes up. Mm-hmm. And that's where we find ourselves able to thrive, not simply survive. Mm-hmm. Have any last words before we go?
Through the style of her writing, everything about her being, as I see, everything I have heard from my older relatives, there's a consistency, even in the way she was at the end. She was at the end of an era of gentility, and there was a certain dignity, and as if she had a responsibility. She had a responsibility to people in her life. She had a responsibility to her family. Mm-hmm. She had a responsibility to employees.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds a lot like you.
Well,
so there's the genetic link.
And we have a responsibility to end this tonight. So.
Well, thank you for being with us, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.